All right, so a little bit of trivia here for you. You've probably heard this phrase somewhere in life, whether it's at work, online, whatever, but you've probably heard someone say, or you have probably said this at some point in your life, I can't even, ... right? You just stop the sentence right there. Anybody know when that kind of just became a popular thing? You've been around Journey. It kind of originated when Journey originated back in 2010, which I had no clue. I didn't know there was an original date for phrases and things like that. But apparently back in 2010, this kind of just became a huge thing of people just saying, I can't even. And you can apply that in all sorts of different scenarios and situations. For me personally, I know that I have said that watching Braves baseball this year. I'm a huge Braves baseball fan, and this year, I can't even with the team. It's just rough. It's not a lot of fun. Watch them and you just get frustrated and you're just like, I can't even. And that I can't even deal with the team. I can't even finish watching this game. I can't even just get behind and cheer or be happy, right? Or maybe you've said that in a situation with your kids, right? You're trying to point them and steer them in the right direction. You're warning them about things that they're kind of moving in that direction, and you know that it's not going to turn out well for them, and they just keep on messing up, and you're just like, I can't even stand you, want to be around you, look at you right now. Maybe you've said that in your marriage or a relationship that you're in. I can't even. Or at work, you got that one coworker that you just can't even be around, stand, hear their voice, whatever it is, right? We have that thought that kind of pops into our head from time to time is, I can't even. But the problem happens is when that thought of, or that saying of, I can't even, turns into, I'm done, right? I can't even deal with all this right now, and you just throw your hands up and say, I'm done. That I can't even moves to I'm done. Well, in this series, what we're doing is we're talking about thoughts and things that are in our head that can drive us crazy if we don't get them out of our heads, get them out of our minds so that we can think clearly, so that we can move on and take our next steps towards Jesus. So today, we're going to kick off this series called Out of My Mind, where we're talking about getting the things that are in our minds that are going to drive us crazy out of our minds. Let's get ready.
So we've all gotten to that point, haven't we, where we just can't even. I think that is such a true thing of who we are, because the truth is we get to that place where we just can't even anymore. You've been there, I've been there. In fact, I was just looking at some social media stuff. I saw this one. It said, I need a math nerd to solve the following problem. I make my son a peanut butter sandwich. I cut it diagonally into triangles. However, he wants squares. If he weighs 55 pounds, how much force is needed to launch him into the sun? I think mom is done. She just can't even with the kid right now, right? Or how about this one? A wife says, my husband just walked in, told the dog how cute he was and how much he loved him. He put his face in his hands, stared into his eyes, and gave him forehead kisses, and then he left the room. I am sitting next to the dog. I think she's done, but I'm pretty sure he's done too, if you know what I'm saying. And I saw a sign on, like it was posted near a restroom. It said, snakes active in the area. And it said, flush before use. And I thought, man, if I saw that, I'd be done. There's no chance I'm even gonna think about the idea of going to the bathroom in a place where snakes are active. I'm good. Thanks anyways, I'm done. We've all gotten to the I'm done place. And the problem is that we have, all of us, in these things in our mind where things like I can't even right now turns into I'm done forever. There's a process that happens there, isn't there? There's something that happens between I'm can't even this minute and I'm done forever. And what it is the reality of a thought in our mind that if we don't get it out of our mind, it will drive us out of our mind. That's what we're talking about during this whole series. Lies that are in our heads, that if they're in our minds now and we don't get them out of our minds, they will, in fact, drive us out of our minds. Maybe you've been there. Maybe even right now, you're there and you're like, I'm done. I'm done with my marriage. I'm done with church. I'm done with Jesus. I'm done with my kids. I'm done with the money problems. And you're just ready to give up. Whatever giving up looks like for you, I want you to hear this. In fact, if you hear nothing else today, hear this. No matter how you feel, know what's real. God is not done with you. Let me say that again. No matter how you feel, know what's real. God is not done with you. There's a great story in scripture about a man named Elijah. Elijah is a prophet. Now, a prophet is just a person who hears from God about the future and tells them about it, or he stands kind of in the gap for his faith and stands and kind of like heralds the future. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but Elijah had a really good day. I mean, one of the greatest days of his whole like career as a prophet. He has this huge day, and he expects that after the huge day, after this mountaintop experience, things are going to keep looking up, keep going great, keep heading the right direction, but they don't. A couple of days after this great day, this huge proof of God kind of moment that we'll talk about, all of a sudden, rumors begin to surface that the queen, Jezebel, has put out a hit on Elijah. So Jezebel literally is going to kill Elijah, and Elijah is just exhausted. He's got to the place where he's past I can't even, and he's all the way to I'm done. I can't do it anymore. In fact, in 1 Kings 19, verse 4, it says this. This is pretty crazy because how authentic it is from him. It says, then he went alone into the wilderness, Elijah, and sat down under a solitary broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord. Now, isn't that how we feel sometimes? Like there are times where no matter how good things went 2 days ago, just a couple of days later, we're ready to give up. Like Elijah had this great mountaintop experience and blew it up, and it was great. Jezebel puts a hit out on him, and he winds up sitting underneath a solitary broom tree, just kind of this puny little shade tree, leaning up against it, just praying that God would take his life. It's a little pathetic, isn't it? But we've all been there. In fact, if you haven't been there, one of two things is true. Either you're very young or you aren't paying attention. Because we've all been to the place where we feel like we're just done. But we've got to get that thought out of our mind, or it will drive us out of our mind. Just like Elijah's story. Elijah's story is exactly the same. He's got to get that thought out of his mind, or it literally is circling the drain quickly, isn't it? We've got to get to that place. And how do we get there? Hold on just a minute. You just hold on to that question. How do we get past I'm done? And let me just tell you a quick story. I honestly am a little disappointed in my life. I'm a lot disappointed because at this point in my life, if you would have believed all of the movies that I watched as a kid, I'm very disappointed because I thought by the time I was 40 years old, a karate fight would have broken out by now. Like if I grew up watching Karate Kid and Karate Kid 2 and all the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and all of the like violent movies of the day of the 80s and 90s, and I grew up watching those thinking that one day there was just going to be an epic karate battle that was going to break out like Cobra Kai style, right? But it has never happened in my life. Now, you don't know this, maybe, and maybe it's not something that I talk about a ton, but I took a lot of karate when I was a kid. In fact, I liked to fight in tournaments. And I fought in this one tournament, and I was pretty excited about it. I trained for a while for it, went to this tournament, and they, sorted all the age groups out, and I kind of imagined it was going to be like Karate Kid, like this epic thing with grandstands, and it wasn't. It was like 30 people in a room, and that was it, and most of them were probably parents. And they said go, and here's what happened. I was fighting for my spot in the deal, and they dropped their hand and said go. And the next thing I know, I was waking up with the smelling salts underneath my nose. I didn't know anything that happened. And what happened was somehow this guy that was on the other side kicked me on top of my head. I'm 6 feet tall. He put his foot, before I even knew it, on top of my head. I got third place in that tournament. That sounds like a great accomplishment. I got a cool trophy and everything. What's weird about it is there was only 3 people in it, and I was in third place, but they already bought the trophy, so they gave it to me. Trophies are a way to remember our victories, right? I mean, maybe that one's not such a big deal, and I didn't keep that one for very long and tell a lot of people about it. But you maybe got some trophies. Maybe you're athletic, or your kids have been in something. They got a thing. I think it's crazy now. I mean, you could play like third grade Little League, and you get a World Series ring. I mean, these kids got like 20 rings. It's a little pathetic, to be honest with you. But That's your deal. So, but the thing is that those trophies, those reminders help us remember the victory. How do we get past the I'm done thing in our life? You know how you do it? You get past I'm done by remembering God's victories. I told you we'd talk a little bit about Elijah's story. And Elijah's story was a huge victory. So just a chapter before this point where he's done and ready to give up and says that I just want to die, a chapter before that, he's facing off literally against the prophets of Baal. So prophet of God, Elijah, versus the prophets of Baal. It was like an epic battle, right? And so they were together, and the prophets of Baal like said, let's test this God of yours, Elijah. And they said, we'll call down fire from heaven. You call down fire from heaven, and we'll see who shows up. And so the prophets of Baal are going crazy. They're all in on this story. They're dancing around. They're getting crazy. They're desperate. They're praying. They're waiting. They're singing. They're yelling and screaming. They start cutting themselves. They're really desperate, right? And they start doing all this stuff, just trying to get it. And Elijah just starts talking trash. It's one of my favorite parts of the Bible when people are sarcastic or talk trash a little bit. And so Elijah's like, hey, where's your God? Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's talking. Maybe he's doing something else. There's literally a part, look it up for yourself, 1 Kings chapter 18, where he says, maybe he's in the bathroom. Maybe he just is indisposed for a moment. He'll be here in a second. You guys should yell louder. And they keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And then Elijah says, hey, let me give you a break. Let me try it. And he pours water on the top of his altar, and he just prays simply to God, and fire comes down from heaven, and it explodes in fire. And clearly God is the God that is the winner, right? Huge day, mountaintop experience, top of the world. Can you imagine being Elijah? You've literally taunted them, and now you just kind of go, hey God, would you set this thing on fire? And fire falls down out of the sky. Killer moment. And now if I'm Elijah, I think, man, clearly a revival is about to break out. Like, these people are clearly going to do whatever I want. They're going to follow my God. They're going to be a big part of my life, and we're going to move forward and take this message to the streets. But not so much. All of a sudden, not only do they not follow, but Jezebel puts a hit out on him. 2 days later, he's under that broom tree, just pathetic and saying, God, would you just take my life, because this is terrible and I've had enough. The thing I want you to hear about this is remembering God's victories is what helps us keep from getting from I can't even to I'm done. We've got to remember the times when God showed up, because here's the truth that we need to understand. The God that was with you on the mountaintop is the same God who is with you in the valley. Let me say it again. The same God that was with you on the mountaintop is the very same God who is with you in the valley. So we remember to the victories that God's given us, but there's more to it than that, isn't it? We can't just look at yesterday. We want to live in tomorrow. And the thing that we're stuck with today is this pull on us. You feel that pull when you're desperate, when you're somewhere between I can't even right now and I'm done forever. When you're in that spectrum, when we're moving this direction, there's this pull toward us to do something unhealthy. Not only do we need to remember the victories, we need to fight the whirlpool. You felt that before, haven't you? You felt like I have, this pull in you to do something that's maybe wrong or unhealthy. You felt that pull to like harbor bitterness or not forgive somebody or be resentful. You felt that, haven't you? I have. I know that it's a part of my life. Have you ever felt that pull to have a conversation you knew wasn't going to end well? Like you knew it wasn't going to take you to a positive place, or it wasn't going to leave you with a positive choice in your life? Or maybe you've had that feeling that you're overwhelmed and you want to eat to medicate your feelings. We've all been there. Something sweet, something salty just feels like it's comforting to us when we're going through difficult things. There's something inside of us physically that pulls us toward an unhealthy place when we want something bad. When we're moving from I can't even to I'm done, there's something in us that just kind of pulls us toward these negative feelings. Maybe you feel like you want to drink too much just to kind of take the edge off. We've all been there. None of us are exempt from it. And if you haven't been there before, you'll be there soon. It's a part of it, but we all need to fight that whirlpool, because our negative experiences lead to negative thoughts and feelings. Our negative thoughts and feelings lead to negative assumptions. Let me just explain. When we have a negative situation, when something makes us feel less than, when something moves us off of that, moves the needle just a little bit away from I can't even right now to I'm done forever. Like when we're beginning to move that way, there's something in us that pulls us away. Those negative situations lead to negative thoughts and feelings. I want you to understand something. There is never a time in your life when you have a thought when you don't have a feeling. And you never have a feeling without having a thought. Those two are always together. Thoughts and feelings are naturally connected and they're not always the same. You might have a valid thought and an invalid feeling. You might have a valid feeling and an invalid thought. One is not better than the other. You might lead with feeling and then find out the thought later. You might lead with the thought and find out the feeling, but you can't depend on either one of them. We have to fight the whirlpool that takes us from this negative situation to negative thoughts, to negative feelings, to negative assumptions. And that happens in our life. We live in the post-COVID world, or at least theoretically we live in it, right? There's a part of us where we're going, man, we're past it, right? Can I be honest with you about the negative movement in my life from the negative situation to the negative assumptions? Can I be honest, like even this feeling of being in church online? There's a part of me as a leader that saw what was before COVID and then now begins to experience the negative situation that happened in our lives in the last year or so. And then all of a sudden, it starts with my thoughts and feelings. Well, people aren't coming back to church. They're going to go to church online and never bother coming back. They're just going to hang out on the other side of a screen and we'll never get to have this like real personal relationship. Or we begin to have these feelings like I'm desperate and I don't think this is ever going to work. Or this whole story is over and God has nothing new, or he's already done with me. Do you see what's going on? I have a negative situation. It spirals into negative thoughts and feelings. And the next thing I know, the assumptions are there, aren't they? Man, you see where my assumptions would be? Doing ministry is a waste of time. Ministry is over. Maybe it could be a feeling that like this, even connecting with you right now in your living room in real time is useless. It could feel that way, couldn't it? Because the negative situation leads me to negative thoughts and feelings, winds up in a negative assumption, none of which is true, right? I know full well that God's not done. I know full well that this is better for us than not doing this at all. I know that people are like you are figuring out how to make their way back to church. Maybe we just got out of the habit. Maybe we're still a little bit scared, but I know that God's doing something good, and the God that is in me is bigger than who is in charge of this world. In fact, that's one of the things that I really want us to get as we're dealing with all this, is that not only do we need to remember what God's done in the past, we need to be confident that we can fight the whirlpool, that negative pull in our life that takes us from negative situations to negative thoughts and feelings to negative assumptions that wind up moving the needle from I can't even right now to I'm done forever. That's exactly what happened with Elijah. Elijah got the death threats, he knew all this stuff, and he had moved from the negative thoughts and feelings to the negative assumptions. In fact, I want you to look at the second half of that same verse that we read a little bit earlier. It says this, the first half of it said, he sat down on a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. You see the negative assumption? The negative situation, negative thoughts and feelings, negative assumption, I am no better than my ancestors who are already dead. They're worm food. I'm no better than that. I might as well be dead because my life is as worthless as death. Do you see what happens? Negative situations carry us to negative thoughts and feelings, which carry us very simply right to those negative assumptions. We've got to become this kind of people that fight back against the whirlpool. So how do you do that? I'll tell you what happened with Elijah. He fought back with food. He hadn't been eating well or right in the last several days. He'd been so scared and so overwhelmed with the circumstances that he quit eating. So fight back with some food, nourish your body. There's a connection between your physical body and your spiritual well-being. So care for who you are. Care for it. Get up and exercise. Try walking a little bit. Try eating something that's good for you. Don't just go run to the fridge and pick out whatever is easy to eat. Choose to eat better. Fight back with food. Then he fights back with rest. He hadn't slept well. He hadn't slept intentionally for days now. And so he came off of a really big spiritual high right into a valley that kind of sucked his life up, and he was just overwhelmed. So choose to rest. And when it talks about this in scripture, Elijah retreated and rested and ate. So for days, all he did was sleep and eat, and get up and sleep and eat. And that's helpful because we fight back with what's physical in our life so that we can fight back with truth. That's an important thing to do, is not just eat better and sleep more. He fights back with truth, and we need to do the same thing. In fact, I put together a list of things that I want you to hear, of things that we have a tendency to feel, and then I've paraphrased some verses on the other side of it because it needs to replace those lies, those things that are in our minds that if we don't get them out of our minds, they will drive us out of our minds. When you feel like I'm all alone, I want you to know that God says he will never leave you or forsake you. When you feel like everything is ruined, don't know that God says, I can do more than you can ask or imagine. When God says, when you feel like it will never work out, like this isn't gonna pan out together, I want you to know that nothing is impossible for God. When you feel like nobody has a plan, God says that he has a plan for you, a plan to prosper you and not to harm you. When you feel like I don't matter, I want you to know that God made you on purpose and for a purpose. When you feel like nobody is looking out for me, know that Jesus says, or God says, that no matter whoever puts their faith in me will never be put to shame. When you feel like nobody cares about you, I want you to know that God hears your prayer and he knows what you need. When you feel like it's all over, I want you to know that God is already doing a new thing. When you feel like you can't change, like you're stuck too much in your old ways, I want you to know that God will complete the good work that he's already started in you. When you feel like that you're not strong enough, I want you to know that God is strong enough. When you feel like the worst is on the way, I want you to know that the best is yet to come. I want you to know this. Romans 8:28 is one of the most quoted verses in the world, and honestly, sometimes one of the most misquoted. But it does, in fact, say that God will work together for good all the things for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So it tells me this: if it's not good, then God's not done. Let me say that again. If it's not good, God's not done. So we remember God's victories. We fight against the whirlpool, and then we begin again. Again. We begin again. Again. We've all been there, right? We've all felt the needle move from I can't even right now toward I'm done forever. And we keep having to reset and keep having to come back and keep having to go. And we begin again, again, and again, and again. For Elijah, he takes a 40-day trek to this place called Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is the mountain where God met Moses. And he makes his way up there after 40 days and nights, and he makes his way to this place, and he comes face to face with God. And what's crazy about it is how Elijah finds such rest and peace and solace in God's presence. Now, here's what happens, a little bit of it, is that he goes up to this mountain. Now, remember, this is the place where God came face to face with Moses. So this is kind of like God's home court advantage, right? And Elijah shows up. And just days before this, now about 42 days before this, Elijah saw God throw fire down from heaven. He's been on the mountaintop. He's been through the valley, and now he's headed to this place that's a retreat, a place where he can get face to face with God. And he's so used to it now. I mean, like, he's so overwhelmed by all that's gone on. But he comes face to face with God in this thing. And I want you to know, if you're going to honestly begin again, you need to be ruthlessly honest with God. You're in a place where it's dark, or you will be soon, or you have been before. Whether it was like a week or a month or a year ago, you've been in a place that is really dark and seemingly hopeless. And you feel like you can't tell anybody about it. but you can. God wants to hear exactly what's going on in your life, what exactly you're feeling, all the disparity, all the frustration with him. He's a big boy. He can take the questions. In 1 Kings 19, like 9 and 10, it says this. It says, but the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah, when he's up on this mountain? And Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty. But the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets, and I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Do you hear what's going on? He's not just telling God information. Hey, God, you called me to be a prophet, and it's not going so well, and I'm kind of nearing the end of my rope. What he's saying is, God, I've served you zealously, and I've been one of your prophets, and now your people are walking away from you, and they've killed all the prophets, and I'm the only one left, and now they're going to kill me. You know what he's saying? He's telling God exactly in raw nature how he feels. How do you feel? When you're lost, when you're hurting, when you're moving from I can't even to I'm done, how do you feel in that? Be honest with God. Part of beginning again is us being honest with God about what's really going on the inside. He knows already. You know already. So why not be upfront and honest with him about it? So if you want to begin again, be honest with God. And then listening for what God is going to do and God to show up in the moment. He goes to the mouth of this cave that he's in, and a big windstorm comes by. But God wasn't in the wind. And then like fire, but God wasn't in the fire. You know what God was in? The whisper. It's crazy because Elijah's seen God in the fire just 42 days earlier. He's seen God show up in really big, obvious ways. But here, God wasn't in the wind. God wasn't in the fire. God was in the whisper. So if you want to begin again, in the middle of your mess right now, if you want to move back toward I can't even today and away from I'm done forever, then choose to be honest with God. And then choose to listen and watch closely for God at work. He may not be really loud. He may be wanting you to listen closely. But I'll promise you this, God is at work in you. God's not done with you yet. God's not done with your situation. God's not done with your mission. God's not done with your purpose. God is not done with you. If you're not dead, then God's not done. I want you to hear this, and as I wrap things up, I want you to know that your story is not finished. Your life is not over. Your calling is not canceled. Your purpose is not poisoned. Your mission is not mangled. Your destiny isn't derailed. Your dreams are not dead. You serve a God who knows. You know a God who sees. You have a God who has an advocate and is a guide for you. You know a God that is strength. You follow a God who gives you a future in Jesus Christ. So let me just say this. If you're not dead, then God's not done. God's not done with your story yet. In fact, let me just point this out to you, that this God that we talk a lot about around here is a God that wants to have a relationship with you. And if you haven't begun a relationship with Jesus, today is a great day to do that. The God that gives you a purpose and mission, the God that gives you a value and something to live for, the God that restores us when we're broken, it wants to have a relationship with you. And it really is just as simple as you stopping right now where you are and telling God that you want to have a relationship. I walked away from you, God. I sinned, and I don't want to do that, live that life anymore. I don't want to move closer to I'm done. I want to deal with you today and go get to this I can't even, but I'm not done because I know you're at work. So let me just invite you to do that right now where you're at. Just tell God that you've broken a relationship with him and that you want to have it back. And he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And he makes a promise to us in Luke that he comes to bind up our broken hearts and set our captives free. He says that he wants to get those thoughts out of your mind before they drive you out of your mind.